In this episode, we sit down with Ben Field, a pioneer of modern lure fishing, founder of the well-renowned Art of Fishing, and organiser of the Cornish Lure Festival. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and remember to subscribe to the podcast. Let's dive in.
Right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Tuna Gear podcast. This is Andy Bolt. I'm Danny Parkins, and today our guest is none other than Ben Field. So Ben owns the Art of Fishing, which is a fishing shop in Cornwall. The Cornish Lure Festival has been instrumental in the lure fishing industry, the modern lure fishing industry for, I think it was since 2010-ish.
Yeah, 2010, 2011.
And the birth and the growth of that within the UK. And something I'm very fond of. It's something that I've done from a young age. So I've known you for God knows how long.
Yeah,
been to all the shops.
Too long.
Yeah.
Too long.
So, let's get you on. We thought we'd get you on. This is an industry podcast talking about the fishing industry, and I thought we need some characters that own independent stores that we can talk to about fishing.
All of what we do.
So,
it's really good. Thank you for having me. It's wicked to be here. Thank you very much.
Mate.
Your name came up first, actually, when me and Danny first started talking about this. Your name was probably one of the first 2 or 3 that came out. It's like he got all excited. He does this thing where he gets all twitchy, doesn't he?
God knows why.
Yeah. He was all over that one. Yeah.
Good. Passion. We love a bit of passion. So, and you need it for the sport. So, yeah. So, how did it start, Ben? Come on,
Well, that was it, really. I suppose it was just passion. I mean, it was, to be honest, actually, the shop side and the business side was never my intention of what we ended up doing. I mean, really, I was with my, the story will progress, obviously, but with my ex-girlfriend, Jo, she'd, to cut a long story short, always wanted to run her own business of some kind, but didn't know what to do. She came up with all sorts of ideas. This is probably 2008, 2009, that she'd just sort of trying to think about what to do. And eventually there was this little shop that had come up in the village that we lived in. Tiny little empty shop, not much to it. And eventually, because her dad fished, I ended up joking with her one day about the idea of us opening a tackle shop. Completely ludicrous, because never did I want to do that. No inclination at all. But she joked or passed this idea on to her dad, who, as an angler, was like, because he was always her family perhaps were always going to help her out a little bit financially with whatever she decided to do. And he said, yeah, actually, that's a cool idea. Do that. So she pretty much just came home one day. Well, I was working from home, making websites at the time. She came home one afternoon and was like, well, we should open a tackle shop. It's like, that's crazy. But actually, I'm on board with that. I love fishing tackle. Like, it's what I've always done. At the time, even, I was actually already, I suppose, looking to work, not within the trade, but to do my own little thing, which is really is how I've always done things. I just live in my own little world, do my own little things. I was actually building a website, one of the trillions of products I've started that never actually finished, at the time, which was all about lure fishing, because probably in around about 2007, I'd really got into lure fishing and how easy it made my life. I mean, as a traditional sea angler, and then eventually as a match angler, on the coarse fishing side of things, I had just moved very close to the sea and needed something super convenient to fit in with the way that my life was. I didn't want to have to drive to a local town to buy bait and then drive home again to go fishing off my doorstep, sort of thing. So having a lure rod set up was the really obvious choice. This really was sort of prior to lure fishing being what it is now at all. I mean, especially bass fishing, it was very much a case of carp rods or what was originally maybe something like the Mike Ladle shore spin rods. Exactly, stuff like that. So he was around the corner even. So it was very much sort of Rapala J13s, Dexter wedges and Tobies. Really simple, really, compared to what we have now. But that was what I started to do. Wasn't very successful at all, but it was literally 2 minutes walk across the coast path, and I was there, so I could go as often as I wanted.
Taught yourself from scratch.
Yeah, literally, really. Well, at the start, absolutely, because again, I sort of as a sea angler all my life, really. That's how I probably started when I was 4 or 5. But it was a case of spinning. And a spinning rod, thinking, okay, I'll have a go for a bass and try and figure this out. I was doing it all wrong, obviously, at the start. I mean, like you do.
How did that start? Was it Dad, granddad?
Well,
how
yeah,
did
I guess
fishing-
I was
just where you live.
with my dad for sure. I mean, he grew up in Newquay, I think, and actually then we've always lived on the North Cornwall coast somewhere. So we just used to go sea fishing basically from when I was probably about 5, something like that. Mostly sort of places. Newquay Headland was somewhere where we went a lot.
It's just like chucking red gills off the rocks.
Yeah, well, it wasn't even that. It was literally just like chucking bait and doing it as we've always done it. I mean, float fishing with and chucking mackerel feathers and just typical stuff like that. Really.
On the end of a
yeah,
hook,
literally, it was like at that point. I mean, to be honest, to this day, I don't think I've ever caught a fish on a limpet. But actually, it's what you did when you couldn't get any other bait, sort of thing. So. But yeah, just a bit of fun and just to get out with my dad, which was always amazing.
I mean, my wrasse fishing journey, which is how we knew each other from back in the day, that started with going out with my dad and my brother with ragworm or a crab under a float catching wrasse.
That was what I loved doing. I think
the lure fishing progressed into that.
Absolutely, I think
that was from those exact routes.
Yeah,
sitting on the rock with a little spinning rod. I think my dad was proper.
The thing that I ended up most enjoying about the sort of more traditional side of sea fishing that we're doing was the float fishing with rag for wrasse. Like it was so good just watching the float fly under the water, obviously, and then you'd be into something happening. Obviously, we were using rods at that time. I mean, it'll probably transpire within the stories that we'll tell today, I'm sure, but we all eventually started fishing super light for them in comparison because they were still days when you'd be convinced by everybody that you had to have a beach cast or even an up tide rod to try and get these fish out of these snags.
You still hear that now?
Oh, you will, absolutely,
Sean, in the tackle shop.
Yeah.
I remember talking to him saying, I was down on the Sillies with a 1 to 9 gram Daiwa rod, LRFing basically off the rocks for these wrasse. You can't do that. You need to have... And he come out with this thing. It looked like one of me tuna rods. He's like, you need the... No, I don't.
No, not at all. I mean, that's the thing with when... Well, especially after LRF started, obviously, and then obviously it became more of a wrasse thing specifically, the number of 5-pound wrasse and 6-pound wrasse were landing on tiny, light little rods is not making a joke of it, but it's like... It's so opposite to what we always learn and what we were always told and what we just went along with without ever questioning it. And I think that's the thing that's now really changed or started to change around about that point when lure fishing started to become a thing, because we were finally in a position where there were a few very inspirational guys, especially a couple of the guys, probably at the time for me, over in Jersey. The White brothers over there were getting very clever with what they were doing on the technical side of lure fishing. And it's from that point where I suppose I got on board with the idea of that, because my history, again, as a match angler on the course side was all about taking things to the tiniest little detail.
Yeah.
And that was all...
hook comes down through the water.
Yeah, that's it. There's so many tiny things that just add up. 1% here and 1% there that add up to catch you more fish. And you might get some of those right, but if you can get more of them right, then you're going to catch more fish than the next guy. And that's kind of what I like to my lure fishing to sort of work towards. I mean, I want to catch more fish than the guy stood next to me, sort of thing. Just for a laugh, obviously. I mean, it's not competitive minded at all within most of what we do lure fishing.
Blagging rights.
But it's literally just like everybody's surely got something inside of them where they're a bit like the guy. Me and Daddy are next to each other, just having a laugh. I want to beat him, and he wants to beat me.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it is.
When I'm out on the boat with the boys, we just might be up at start, just messing about, or out by the bellboy doing something. But it doesn't matter if we all catch a mackerel, who's got the biggest mackerel.
Absolutely, isn't it?
It's down to those little things, and it's... You've got to beat each other.
Absolutely. And that's where these tiny things sort of start to come into their own, especially when you've got you're fishing with guys who know what they're doing. You need to be more clever than they are, basically, at figuring it out on the day, or just having a wider vocabulary in a way of fishing skills to be able to turn a situation around and adapt to what's going on.
I think the White lads over there, I mean, they were certainly mirror exactly what you said. It was Keith White that got me thinking I should lure fish. And it was very, very quickly... Because I used to do so much wrasse fishing.
Yeah.
I was head over heels in love with it anyway.
Yeah.
Took a bit of my freshwater fishing into that with my lure rods to be able to do that then. So it was actually, same as you, Keith White.
Yeah.
Is that pre-social media days then?
It was really, because actually that was basically through what was at the time, which still runs today, is there's the World Sea Fishing Forum, for example. That originally was probably one of the sort of online forums that I became a part of. And it was through there that once I started bass fishing badly, eventually you start to see mentions of some of these Japanese lures, especially from with again hugely sort of inspirational and important in the trade was Mick at Mr. Fish in Jersey, who at the time was pretty much the only shop selling any modern Japanese tackle.
We have
coming on the podcast soon.
Good, because he knows he's the man really. So actually his what he was doing with bringing some of these Japanese bits in, I think mostly probably from Ultimate Fishing in France at the time. The French at that time were very much ahead of us in terms of their sort of bass fishing skills, at least anyway. We ended up probably becoming, as we are now, probably a hybrid of both the French, the Japanese, the Australians and the Americans, really. We've kind of found our own way now. But at the time, it was very French-inspired. And ultimate fishing in France, bringing in the likes of the tackle house lures. The tackle house feed shallow, probably, for example, is quite a famous lure that at the time was the first Japanese lure that I probably really heard about from a bass perspective. And went straight out, bought a few. To this day, which is a running joke of my own, in that I've never caught a fish on one because so many trillions of people have. But at that point, I started to sort of enjoy the fact that lure fishing and sea fishing in general at that point had become more technical and was becoming more technical because it's technical fishing that I enjoy. And that was what was probably realistically always missing for me within what at the time anyway, what was very traditional sea angling. There's obviously technical elements to that today, but I think at the time it was very much more, for want of a better word, it was all of our fishing in the sea was more basic than it is now.
See, I'll probably get some hate for this, but from my carp fishing days, when someone used to mention sea fishing to me, I used to think of high-vis jackets, Shakespeare box, sat on the end of a pier somewhere with two unmatching rods.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And that was sea fishing.
That's just the stereotype, isn't it? Absolutely,
Yeah,
that's it.
that was 100% like sea
Yeah.
fishing. In, like you say, the technical side of it coming into things. People need to start experimenting with these things, and once you start getting that run on it, everybody loves a bit of technical, don't they? In their setup and messing with.
So obviously, you'd had the discussion about setting up a shop. Now we can relay that right back to what we just said. You've got two absolute polar opposites of the scale here. You were like, oh, we're going to set up a shop. Where did that blend? Because I know for a while you did a little bit of basic gear in there, but it was mostly lure fishing gear. But the conversation of like, should we set up just a holidaymakers tackle shop, or do we set up a more premium? Because I know that is a battle that even where I work now, that is a battle I have every day of the camp.
Well, at the time it was mad because there was, like I say, the Mr. Fish was doing what he does in Jersey, but at the time there really was nobody here. There was there was probably Bassmasters down in Cornwall who I think possibly had just started up. There was Lure Heaven who were just after us. There was Chesil Bait and Tackle who were just after us. So it was all starting to happen at that time. But especially from day dot, there was selling a 20 quid lure was mad. Like nobody was doing that apart from Mick perhaps, and the general consensus of the general public, because we were all technically just sea anglers at the time, was that for most people would have thought we'd never sell them as a 400 quid lure rod. I mean, who's going to buy that?
I remember working for Top Water Lures at the time, very similar time, and I remember going to some shops where Nick Robertson told me, go down here and talk a little bit about these lures, Mega Bass and other brands, and the look of sheer horror on their face of a £27 lure.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah,
I mean, it was unheard of.
It wasn't the done thing, but at the same time, it was the only way I could actually have done it, because I wasn't going to just start a fishing tackle shop, because it, like I said, even with my fishing, the shop is the same as my fishing in that it has to be technical. Otherwise, I'm almost not interested. So you
have to have an invested interest.
Yeah, 100%.
Did you not go down the route of selling your basic mackerel rods out the front, some sabikis? You went straight.
We were just straight into like high-end lure stuff.
So there's a thing in marketing in that which you've nailed on the business side, probably indirectly. It's called going deep in niche. It's something I've done with Tuna Gear. Instead of diversifying and doing all these, I've gone just with the bars. And by doing what you did, you probably gave yourself a massive advantage.
Well, it was, because we stood out hugely. Like at the time, it was brilliant because it was all new. I mean, that's the thing with lure fishing generally. I mean, to be honest, today it's probably gotten to the point where we've kind of not plateaued at all, but we're actually kind of, we know what we're doing now. Then everything was new, everything was exciting, and everything was also, from a business perspective for me personally, super chilled, because comparatively anyway, because it was all fresh and it was just a change of life at that point, and it was just a really exciting time, and people were really behind it. So
this was day one, yeah?
Literally day one. That's our first customer even as well. So that's actually John. Haven't seen him for years and years and years, but actually that was John, our very, very first customer. So,
how much did he spend?
Oh, I don't actually remember. It was a busy day because we had although it was a tiny little shop, people remember it really fondly, which is lovely. But it was such a busy day on this tiny little shop, and I was I'd never, a little bit just through the forum probably at the time. Like I say, just World Sea Fishing probably.
I remember. I literally remember I didn't go to the opening, but I remember seeing online.
You didn't go to the opening. Sort of mate of you.
He calls himself a fan.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
I was Top Water as well.
Oh yeah, but it was brilliant. I forget whether it was World Sea Fishing or even by that point the Lure Forum that we were advertising on. I think it was the Lure Forum, possibly actually, which had come along slightly after.
Pre-mail order as well. This is just...
Well, again, there was just within this sort of niche, it was very, very pre-mail order, but actually it was happening. Well, like I say, with the likes of Mick over in Jersey, he certainly had his website. Like you say, Top Water will have been invested in certain other shops, probably, I'm sure, with bits and pieces. But so, this was pretty early days.
Because you were so early, I'm guessing a lot of these lads actually wanted to come in and touch it and look at it and hold it and again, tap you up that quintessential tackle shop. Lads want to come in and talk, don't they?
Exactly. And that's what I probably was underprepared for on the day, because I remember, as you would in a tackle shop, you have guys come in and they want reels loaded and they want this and time spent sorting out a whole combo. But actually, for basically being, although Joe was there as well, all of a sudden I was in a shop situation, which I'd never worked in a shop at all, ever. I've never worked with people even. Like I'm a complete loner generally. All of a sudden I was in actually this really lovely little community that I was the person at the front of it, kind of expected to help out, which was literally my job at that point. Yeah, and everyone
wants your time, don't they?
It was exactly it, and that was the thing with that shop day, is that I remember it being so manic for me personally, because, like I say, you get asked to do all sorts of things that I wouldn't have even thought about. I mean, all I wanted to do up to that point was just get some products on the shelves, because I think it actually started for us from a sales perspective a couple of months earlier, because I think we had the website launched before we opened the shop. So the first day of the shop, it was, I think, 27th, 28th of August 2010, but we actually opened launched the website at least from what was probably June that year. So we were there a little bit before. So I guess it's through the forums and talking about the website that we created that then led on to advertising the open day, and then obviously from there it obviously just spiraled a little bit, really. And yeah, busy days, busy times, but a lot of fun as well, because it was so new to all of us. I mean, everything was experimental, and actually in terms of the products, it's fishing tackle as much as the fishing that I've always enjoyed. I mean, actually, probably go into more of a backstory later, but actually the tackle I just find really interesting, and especially this sort of niche stuff that's a bit new to people. I want to find out about it from a personal perspective to start with, but then it became quite a useful thing to take it back a step, actually, to this project that I was working on before the business, which was after I'd got really into lure fishing. Like I say, heard mentions of the Tackle House feed shallows, all these Japanese and interesting products. Hadn't seen many, but I just decided on one of my random missions in my head that I was going to start building this brand new website. That because lure fishing was such a new thing, people by that point were buying lures and experimenting with lures. I basically, even though I had zero money, would start spending every penny I had on importing lures from Japan. Every bass lure you can imagine or think of, if it was relevant to our fishing in the UK and I thought I could use it and catch a fish on it, I was buying it. I mean,
that to build yourself up is a bit of a, not a guru on it, but
well, a little bit.
Like an authority on, just teach yourself.
That was what I was working on, because it came a point where I could make websites, because that was what I'd done for the previous decade. So again, sort of, that's why I was working for myself as self-employed, making websites. That's why, like I said a minute ago, half jokingly about me being a loner, because I basically worked by myself literally forever, because that's just how I tend to function best in a way. But I was working on this website, which was basically a lure fishing review website, which I regret to this day never got launched, because it would have been brilliant.
Yeah, because that's a real thing now. Like, we've talked about unboxing, getting brands in. Like, you hit something before it was a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, at that point, I built this website and I was writing reviews on every bass lure you could ever imagine. So even if it meant me just buying some of these things, luckily the exchange rate at the time was way better. So I was buying these things from Japan. They still cost a bit of money, obviously, but I was buying these lures in, taking them straight down the beach or the rocks and fishing with them, figuring out how they perform, what they do, how they're different to the others, and then writing about them. But then, again, it'll be something that comes up, I'm sure, during the day, but all these projects that I keep jumping into and jumping out of and trying different things, and it never got launched or finished because we opened the shop. The positive to that, perhaps, is that by that point, by the time we'd opened the shop, I'd fished with literally every bass lure you could almost mention. So I was,
giving yourself an education.
I was like, yeah, fully. Like, I mean, I honestly, at the time, you can, to this day, to a certain extent, you could barely mention a bass lure or brand that I've not fished or not heard of. So actually, it was a real education at the time, and it has been a huge benefit because, like I said, I'm not a salesman. I've never been a salesman as far as I'm concerned. But by that point, I just knew a lot about what we were doing and what we were talking about. So it wasn't through sales techniques that I was perhaps selling a few lures. It was because you could ask me what my opinion on something was, and I'd be like, actually, it's really good.
Sales based. You have a knowledge of a product which the other person
is. It's just a bit sort of indirect in a sort of certain way, isn't it? So, but it's what it's all about.
How did you find obviously, because like you say, you guys, Mick and whatnot, you were kind of trailblazing at that point. It was very unknown. How did you find the politics of sourcing this gear? Because you guys were the front. You were the front line in sourcing these brands and getting them to the UK. It'd never been done before. How did you find that process of getting hold of these brands that 1 out of every 10 person would know what you were talking about? Everyone else didn't have.
Well, I think that's the other benefit, perhaps, of what I'd spent the previous couple of years doing, just spending all my money, tiny little amounts of money I had on just fishing tackle, because you get to know shop owners in Japan and people from that through the trade, and actually get to know a little bit about the trade in Japan.
So were you going to the shops to start with instead of going to the manufacturers? You went.
It was really. I guess you just almost start off with shops. Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, not quite like that, but I mean, you end up just sort of meeting people who can perhaps give you a discount here or a discount there to enable you to just bring something in to put it on the shelf to see what happens, really. And that was the great thing about that time, is that you could have bought, regardless of where I'd gotten it from or the price not the price fully. Everything was always expensive, to be honest, because even at that point, I think if anything, lures today are comparatively cheaper probably to what they were then, because some of the lures now that we sell are only £2 or £3 perhaps more expensive than they were 15 years ago. And actually that's not the biggest jump in the scheme of things. No, they were probably technically more expensive then than they are now. But at that point, because everything was new and people hadn't really found their feet with what works and where, and they hadn't settled in a way like we have a little bit now, I could bring in something that I knew was a good product because I've used it typically, and we put it on the shelf and people would buy it and give it a go. And that was why the whole business and the whole fishing community was so exciting at that time, because we were just trying literally everything, like to give it a go, because it might well be worth it. Like I said, it has changed now a little bit, because we've kind of now, I think, written some things off because maybe they weren't quite right. There's other things that we sort of find just easier to use or more snag-proof is always a really good example. So we just stick to a little bit of what we know. But at the time, it was like anything went, literally. So it was a really good time. Those first couple of years were the most exciting of the lot, because it was just all new and all exciting. So it
sounds amazing.
It was really good because, like I said, not even just from a tackle perspective, just the methods and the techniques we were using as well. We were just, like I said, everything goes. And especially, to be honest, once the LRF side started, because although it got a huge amount of beef at the time, it's probably led to all of us as saltwater lure anglers actually being more technical now than we were previous.
When did LRF come in?
To be honest, I started doing it, like I say, I think probably there'll always be some people out there who are like, oh yeah, I was doing that in the 70s or whatever, but it's very different. It's like I said, with the likes of the White brothers in Jersey, and then myself and literally a couple of others, I think we were probably starting in 2007, 2008, something like that. And there were literally a tiny handful of us who were just inspired enough to think, actually, I'm kind of bored of my beach casters now. I do a lot of coarse fishing, for example. So I catch huge fish on my little dainty coarse rods.
Yeah.
So why don't I just give that a little bit of a go in the sea and see what happens? And like I said, I enjoy the technical elements because of the match fishing. LRF was very much like that because it was about hook sizes and jig head weights and sink rates and line weights and line diameters and all the little technical gubbins. So it just really appealed to me on a personal level, obviously. So,
I said to you, didn't I, previously, where I hold my hands up and I said it openly. I don't want no part of that.
Yeah,
but
it was hardcore. Like some of the grief was horrible.
Actually, when I moved to Plymouth and I'd met up with a couple of the actual artificial beats, and I was coming from a RAS background a bit. I was like, what the fuck do I want to do anything with that? I remember wholeheartedly, and I said it in my episode. I fell head over heels in love with LRF.
It's just wicked, really.
It became like obsessive.
I picked it up in 2015, 2016, heavily into carp fishing. Didn't have all the time that I wanted. Carp fishing, a bit like match fishing, it's a time thing.
It's a whole week prior to the session.
Yeah. It's a massive time thing. And even when you're trying to get out, if you're hunting a certain carp in a lake, You up at the ponds, you're lapping, you're doing this, you're doing that. And I found myself just wanting this carp fix or a fishing fix. And I stumbled across it on YouTube. And I went into Euro Angling when it was still the little shop up by the courthouse. And I went in there, and the grief I got. What do you want to catch gobies for? What do you want to do this for? Oh, you're fishing in rock pools, are you? And I was like, no, I've been catching some wrasse and stuff. Gay.
Yeah, that's it.
I absolutely, like I said, I went down to the Sillies with it and started using it down there. I didn't get into the technical side of it. Mine was more, if I had a 1 to 9 gram rod, I want to find the biggest lure that I could sling out on it just to get a bit of distance. Just loved it. It's the way
fun playing the fish, because rods are designed to bend. So actually, a lot of
I could get this thing tip to butt.
Yeah,
and it was I had a little 1,000 reel on there, braid, fluoro leader, quick clip on the end, and that was it. A load of the different Savage Gear weedless lures. I had them all in a little pouch, and all of a sudden I could jump. I could go over to the headland. We were down on holiday, and now I've got one of those HTO, I think it is, or something. Travel rods, packs down 5 sections into that, comes everywhere with me when I'm on holiday. Yeah. And I've got it rigged up for basically glorified LRF fishing. Yeah. And I can go out and get a 2-hour fishing fix.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I mean, you can just go for a walk with your rod in your hand, can't you, really? Like, even if you have 10 casts, it doesn't matter. You've just been out on the coast and you've seen some of the things that other people that aren't anglers don't get to see, and you've had a nice 100%,
time. Yeah, I found it fascinating, obviously, being a open, not hater, but I was like, I very much... didn't want anything.
You were an open hater, mate. Yeah. Don't try and butter it up.
I remember sitting watching some of the socials that you guys ran down with us, and I remember being like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's like, I think the thing is...
I can feel it sucking me in.
I can empathise so strongly with anybody that actually didn't look at it and think, wow, I want to do that. Because
I was there with my 25 gram wrasse rod and a bait caster, fishing 20 pound fluorocarbon and fishing big pigs out of the rocks. Yeah. And I was a guy next to me with a 5 gram Magecraft. I was like,
yeah, that's it.
But actually, it was so. I was so, and I tell everyone, I was so wrong. Yeah. It was so fascinating. Flounder fishing on LRF. Yeah, that's it, for me in the inner harbours. That's floundering. What was absorbed me.
Yeah, well, it gives you
unhealthily absorbed me.
It gives you a whole new mission, doesn't it? Because
I didn't think that was even a thing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about LRF, because actually it got to a point where it started off when we started really with mackerel, pollock, bass, wrasse, things like that. They were the sort of mid-water species that were swimming around.
The rocks.
Yeah, all your normal stuff that you've been catching for years, but now we were doing it on 4-pound line and tiny bendy little rods, and actually having a laugh with it, because there's only so many billion mackerel you can catch on mackerel feathers before you're like, I want to have some fun now. Like, actually, these fish fight hard as hell, but I'm hauling them in I'm past the point of enjoying that now. I want to actually have some fun.
A pound and a bit mackerel on a tiny little 3 gram metal on a 5 gram rod.
They're basically like little mini tuna, really.
They are
bombing it, taking line and just going crazy.
On the end,
So all of it, and like I say, when you sort of start to get involved, not that everybody's ever going to, because obviously as anglers we're all different. Some are going to want to be there just to chill out. Some are going to want to there to beat their mates. Some of them are going to just want to try and get to understand the technical elements of it all. Some are going to want to just enjoy using good quality tackle or whatever they do it for. With that technical side, like I said, it gives you a chance to just learn more, and that's what absorbed me. It was the technical elements of all of that made me want to catch 20, even if they're just mackerel, trying to catch 20 mackerel on light gear rather than 5, like I said earlier, like the guy next to me sort of thing. So, and then that's the same with pollock, it's the same with bass, and you catch there was one of our lure festivals that we mentioned earlier, where one of the years it was a real struggle on the bass front. I think the LRF guys caught more bass than the bass guys did. Like, it's incredibly effective.
Because they finessed everything down that bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, like I say, if conditions are tough and you need to actually get a fish to take a lure, where ultimately you're trying to convince it to take a piece of plastic. So there's no denying that some days they're just going to be looking at it a bit like, that's just not quite right.
Yeah, I'm not feeling this.
Whereas if you just take it, like I say, if you add one of those little percentages that's going to make it slightly more appealing to that fish, then you're going to catch more bass, no matter what the species is. And that's what actually the point I was going to make a second ago when we were saying about the flounder. LRF opened up millions of gateways for us to try and start concentrating on figuring out all of a sudden how to catch every species you can list. Yeah. Like, nothing was not a target. Like, we went from just catching half a dozen species, or knowing how to, or thinking we knew how to catch half a dozen species of fish, to be like, well, I'm going to try and catch a blimmin' thornback ray on a lure next, and then you
Well,
go off and try and do it. Yeah, right.
There's
done.
no lads doing YouTube videos on species hunts.
There's so few fish that I've not. I mean, I can barely name a fish that hasn't been caught on a lure now in the UK.
I think I ended up one season when I was in Plymouth. I think I had 34 species in a season.
Yeah, that's it. It's mad what you can do, isn't it?
And I remember at one point I was over into the Cornish border on a little rock mark there. We were kind of touch and go on some private land on this little set of rocks, and I remember
trespassing.
Yeah, technically. And I remember a certain species that got me zoned in, and I wanted to catch a big male one, dragonets.
Yeah, that's it. They're very cool.
I literally just switched a dragonet, which is like a sandy coloured fish with a nice big. The males have electric blue in them. They're there. Like, are you familiar with an Australian flathead? It's like a bottom fish that's got a big flat profile. It lives in the sand. It's got quite a flat profile. They're quite spiky. They're strikingly beautiful. You have to look. But I remember that. I mean, me and Ben Church.
Yeah.
Wasting hours.
Yeah.
Hours and hours targeting dragonets because I wanted a big male one, the same as Gurnard and stuff like that. But the dragonets got me back.
Yeah,
I remember being
to this day. I mean, the one thing of LRF that has really expanded over the years and gotten bigger as it's gone through is the species hunting side of things. Because, like I said, to start with, we were probably more exclusively about the technical elements, and we were only really focusing originally on those half a dozen species that we'd always caught. Because even at that point, we didn't know what the potential was really going to be. But actually, then. Because, again, to go back one step, with our first Cornish Lure Festival, we've always run it with a species section, a wrasse section, and a bass section. The species hunting section on the first year that we did it was one with 5 species. And that now is like, you catch 5 in an hour.
Yeah, like, on one rock.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was crazy how it changed and developed from the technical side originally to then eventually evolving over a decade or more to the point where now LRF is almost all about species hunting. If anything, it's kind of now become more about what people thought it was, to be really honest, originally. And like you say, a lot of people to start with were all sort of thinking that from the outside it was all about gobies, or it was all about catching these tiny fish in rock pools, which, to be honest, from a personal perspective, was never what I actually enjoyed. It was, like I say, for me, it was the mid-water stuff with the technical elements of the sink rates and all that sort of stuff. But now, because we catch such a variety of species and some of them are small, there are still people now who think it's all about gobies, because some of it has always been, I suppose. But it's just expanded so much. I think that's the difference between now and then. Like I say, it was just technical. Now it's to be honest, some parts of it are less technical, but it's far more varied now. Now that we've realised that nothing is off limits. So.
I definitely did the most untechnical side of it with mine. Definitely the most untechnical side of it.
You just got to fish to your capabilities, haven't you?
I just loved it. Yeah, 100%. But for me, it was that 2-hour quick fishing fix. I could grab it, I could go out the door, take the dog for a walk, disappear over the rocks, and I'll come back. It was in the back of the car. No one even knows I've gone fishing.
Yeah. I think for me as well, I think the other side to it probably that I mentioned is that I think the thing about LRF, again, from a personal perspective, but I know it's probably the same for others, that within the types of fishing that I do personally, whether it's the match fishing, whether it's the bass fishing, whether it's the LRF, I do them all for different reasons, actually. So the bass fishing I do completely by myself. I don't typically fish with other people. I might go out with someone like Henry Gilby just for a couple of hours, just for us to go and try some gear out or something like that. But typically we're not fishing. But bass fishing for me is on the north coast of Cornwall, rocky and rough and rugged, and for me it's just solitude, really. So I might have walked a couple of miles. It's a real happy place, and it's just, like I say, it's where I got into lure fishing. It's where I lived by the sea. Typically I fish the areas that I know. It's been one of those years, those things over the years, probably the sort of more somebody says to me, Danny says to me, for example, come up and fish South Devon or whatever. We'll plan a date in. It's all cool. He'll have caught 1 trillion fish the day before. I get there and it's just dead. And that happens so often that I
didn't catch a 1 trillion.
Exactly. You know what he's like now. But at the time I'd have been like, okay, Danny, I'll go up and fish.
Look on his social media. There's no fish.
So it's just like every time I made the effort, it seemed to never work. So I've kind of got to the point now where I'm just like, actually, I'll just fish in my own happy place and just fish my 10-mile stretch of coastline that I know and I love, and it's I can go there and relax. LRF is the same as the match fishing side in that I only do it with other people. I don't like that sort of fishing specifically, to be honest, by itself.
It's more of a social thing.
It's all about the social. That's what
got me. I mean, I remember seeing that the Plymouth meets at Elphinton Pier there and being like,
And again, it's a little bit of one of those where I can empathise with anybody that's given LRF a go and not enjoyed it, because if you do it by yourself, which a lot of people are going to have done, and a lot of people do, and they're going to enjoy it. But for me, I think it only comes into its own when you can be stood there with a friend or a group of friends, and you're on a harbour wall, let's say, and there's this piddly little wrasse down below you that you can all see, and it's coming out of the rocks and pecking at what you're doing. And you just giggle. You're all giggling. Like, come on! You don't even have to be the one fishing, but one of you's got the rod. The rest of you are just like, oh, he's nearly got it. He's nearly got it.
Yeah.
And that's just where it's fun. And then you catch it, and it's like big celebration almost.
Yeah, no, it's that big.
Tiny little
Who
thing.
gives a shit?
But you got a little corporate,
Yeah.
but it's still
Exactly.
such
But it's almost like catching the fish aside. I think it's almost like fishing in general is obviously just being there more often than not, and actually seeing that environment, the aquatic environment, and just seeing what's going on down there. And when you're catching so many fish like you tend to with LRF, you see a lot just from the surface, you catch a hell of a lot, that it's so opposite to perhaps, like I said, the ways that we used to do it, because it also massively accelerates your learning curve when you're doing that. Because if you were to go out and even with bass fishing, let's say you go out and you catch one bass in a session, you don't really know whether you fluked it because of timing or anything else, or whether it was because what you were specifically doing at that second was what you exactly had to do to catch the fish that were always there. So you don't know. You can't take a result from that really as to why you caught that fish. Whereas if you can be fishing somewhere or fishing in a style where you know you're going to catch 50 fish in that session, or you hope to catch potentially 50 fish in that session, then you can try so many different things and figure out so much stuff while you're there, when you know the fish are there and you know you're catching them. And you know that if you change something and you stop catching, then it's not because the fish aren't there. In this scenario, it's actually just that you aren't doing it right. And that's when you see what's right and what's wrong. And like I say,
migrate it across into your other fish.
And then you can exactly that, because you start to learn it, which is what I did, and I know other people have done because I've seen the way the market's changed. But that's when you get to sort of fish in certain ways that then become more productive within your bass fishing. Because again, from a personal perspective, and I know that it did lead a charge, whether bass anglers like to admit it or not, we did start then to fish with more finesse on our bass side of things. We started using more lightly weighted soft plastics. We started fishing with more, like I say, much more delicacy and being more technical than about our bass fishing, which we weren't all doing before. So everything started to change from that sort of 2010 period onwards. Once, like I say, I'd been doing it for a while. There were a few others by this point joining in as well on the LRF side. It was becoming an actual thing, as much as the grief it was getting for all sorts of reasons.
You were having guys turn up in the tackle shop
and that's
asking for LRF specifically.
Yeah, by that point.
I want to get into this LRF.
Yeah. So it was becoming a thing that people that were open-minded were all going to give it a go, basically.
I think you have to be in fishing. You've got to be open-minded.
But no, I think that's the thing. I don't think everybody is. That's the shame of it. But actually, they'll always just do what they want to do. But then again, that's cool as well, because in fairness, everybody's just going to do what they want to do.
How much did you find owning a shop, having what could essentially be a hub for a style of fishing? How much did you find that kind of social element flowed into the shop front, where you had people, like you were saying, you on your own, Joe, there, you were kind of like, oh crap, what's going on? Yeah. How much did you find that eventually, because we all like going in a tackle shop and having a natter, did you find that progressed into the tackle shop, people going in and that
pretty much,
hub?
yeah.
I know it when it was on Barbican, I loved going in there.
Well, that's it. I mean,
just yapping.
That's what the shops have been about, really. I think they, like I say, realistically, probably from a business perspective, they've always been held back by the fact that they were actually, in some respects, they've been held back by the fact that they were so niche. So I think, but at the same time, because they were niche, it meant that people wanted to come to us from farther away. So it's kind of, it's like that with any business. You never know whether that's right or what would have happened if. But absolutely, the shops were hugely sociable places, because it was somewhere where, even if, I mean, from an LRF angler's perspective especially, even if you were online getting grief from bloody everybody, you could come into the shop and you're like, all of a sudden, you're just with your family.
It's like a safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because we're not going to mock you, because literally we're in it with you, sort of.
I used to come in and talk to Mark in Plymouth. Yeah. No, on a bit of a wind-up, knowing that he didn't want to talk about soft plastics with wrasse fishing. I'm like, Mark, and so what do you reckon would be the best thing for wrasse? And he would just roll his eyes.
Exactly.
No, I was just taking the piss out of it. We would have a right laugh.
Yeah, he was brilliant. I mean, to be honest, a funny guy to have working in a shop that sold so much LRF stuff, because he didn't like LRF either.
I used to really wind him up about it. And he'd go into detail real over detail, Keith White style detail about wrasse fishing, and he'd be like, wrasse, I want to catch wrasse.
He's a bass man, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah. But no, it was very cool, especially the Plymouth shop, because that, I mean, it's one of those historical things where, like, we went too fast with everything we did, really. I mean, it's, again, I move very quick on little ideas that I have, and it was like, okay, well, this is really cool what we're doing at the moment in St Mirren. By sort of 2011, 2012, it must have been, where we were just like, should we just open another shop? Like, we're doing all right here. This is nice. We're having kind of a nice little business. This is cool. There wasn't a lot of competition even at that point, because even 5 or 6 or 7 years later, there still weren't many other shops that have twigged.
So you didn't move the shop. You went for shop number 2.
Yeah, we had number 2. So actually, that was obviously maybe it was a lot of stress, because all of a sudden we were managing stuff again with no experience, like trying to do too much, in fairness and in hindsight, for sure. But it was an amazing thing at the time, because like LRF really by that point had become more of a mainstream thing. Well, I say that within lure fishing, it was becoming more accepted. A few years down the line, this is obviously. So we were like, Plymouth isn't that far away. It's an hour away from where we live. There's lots of fishing there, like so much fishing.
It's a city, all of a sudden you're going to tap into it.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing. There were already existing tackle shops in Plymouth, but we knew we could go almost anywhere in the country and open another tackle shop and not compete with the local tackle shops that are already there, because it was so different.
You went with the same setup again. You weren't just going to do your generic mackerel feathers.
No, that's it. No.
It was that.
So it was actually a big shop, really, and it was right on.
I still look at it now when I go down there.
I know, it's sad, really.
It was right on the Barbican, literally right on the harbour front.
Yeah,
and I remember looking there
for.
So we were only there for probably 2 years, something like that. So in a way, we kind of knew that it was always going to be a little bit short term, because it was an expensive shop. Like I said, it was a very impulsive thing to do, because from a business perspective, we probably shouldn't have done it. But at the time, it was just a very exciting period. And we were just like, yeah, screw it. We'll just go and do it. And I ended up, I suppose it's me that's led it all, even though Joe has always been there at that point, where I managed to, the non-salesman in me could pretty much persuade her to do anything at that point within the business, because we were on a bit of a high, I suppose. And actually, I was just very optimistic about the fact that, I mean, I'm always optimistic, so that's probably why it was so easy selling ideas at the time. But
so
actually,
on the opposite end of that, then we just said that it was just over 2 years.
Yep.
When it got to that stage, and you were like, "Fuck, this potentially isn't working as right."
Yep.
What was how did that process take? You being like, "Fuck, we're actually gonna have to close."
Yeah, I mean, it was
that...
to be honest, it kind of got worse than that. But actually, I suppose it was probably 18 months in. We actually, the thing is, the way that it works with shop leases, I mean, generally people might not know this if they're not involved in any sort of retail, but with shops and leases, you'll typically sign, let's say, a lease which might, on average, from my experience anyway, might be a 7-year lease, let's say. Sometimes you'll end up with what people would call what you call a break clause. So there's a period of that contract where basically you could technically leave the shop at that point if you within the right amount of time send in certain bits of paperwork to say that you're not going to continue working with the lease that you have. So which is all cool and all good. So we knew we had basically what was at the time actually I think it was a 2-year break clause, something like that. So we knew that actually we could give it a go 2 years down the line if we want to. Then we'll just close the shop and just sit back and be sensible and just recuperate or sort of reestablish where we are and what we're going to do. But actually, I mean, the shop. To be honest, it was a good little shop. I don't remember at this point, because this was a decade ago. It wasn't a bad shop. It did turn over a fair bit of money, but the expenses there were so big because of the location, because of the staff, because
it was
of all these
super primo location.
Like it was lush. I mean,
business rates kicking.
Yeah. Because now we've got 2 shops, so it was mad on the expenses. We'd gone from having one tiny shop with no business rates to having 2 shops. Massive expenses, numerous staff, and actually it was hang on a minute, sorry I sold you this idea, Joe, because this might have...
because now we've got a bloody job.
I might have pushed it a bit far this time.
Did the other shops suffer because of that shop?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's always things that, I think when you're running an online business and shops, I mean, for us anyway, things always distracted one from the other. So I think by that point, like I said, we did push it too far, but it actually... said a minute ago that it got worse, because basically what happened is that with this break clause that we were like, yeah, cool, we'll just use the break clause and get out. We basically cocked up on the paperwork. So there's always been something that's happened through the various years, lots of little things that have probably held me back from a personal perspective, loads. One of them was this situation, because we had this break clause in the lease. We basically cocked up on the paperwork, which meant that, and it ended up being sent in so late, the paperwork, that actually I think we ended up somehow missing the deadline by like 2 days. By this point, we'd already shut the shop because we were like, yeah, it's cool. Okay, we've got all these expenses. The quickest and easiest thing we can do is actually shut the shop. And then obviously that starts to save us various bits of money. And then we'll just wait for this 2 years to be up on the lease and then we're gone. But we cocked up on the break clause contract bits. So for the following 2, if not 3 years, we were then paying for the rent for that shop, very expensive, and we weren't even in there running a business. So what little money we were making from the rest of the business, we were throwing into a shop that we weren't even using. So, but we couldn't have necessarily just reopened it because it wasn't making enough money, or it was losing possibly even more to actually have reopened it. Or actually, no, it wasn't. It wasn't
relocating the other shop back there and going all in Plymouth.
Yes, but to be honest, that then just would have just drawn away from where my home was and what we wanted to do, because I'd have been commuting to Plymouth every day, and it would have been a total
You'd have had
change.
To be a proper tackle shop.
Basically,
you start selling everything.
Yeah, that's it. That obviously would have always have been a really simple solution, because we could have just done that really early on, and just been a tackle shop. And in somewhere like Plymouth, it'd have been brilliant.
Yeah.
But again, it just wasn't where my heart is, and I can't do things unless my heart is fully into that situation. So that is a bad thing in lots of ways. But I think it also keeps me tight to what I want to do. But like I say, it was a big cock up at the time. I think there was obviously the one of the things we could have done was just reopen the shop. I think actually in hindsight we would have lost less money by just reopening, because even if the shop broke even, we'd have obviously been better off just keeping the shop running. But we were always optimistic about the fact that in that scenario, what you then do is you basically then advertise the shop for rent, and then you get somebody else to come in and basically take it off your hands. It's complicated with assigning the lease, and it basically is a complicated situation, but that's your way out of that scenario. So that's what we planned on doing. So with that, you're optimistic and you get it on the market, and you're like, it's cool, because in 6 months somebody will come and take it on, surely. But then you get time wasters and things that don't go through. And like I said, that's how we ended up 2 or 3, if not 3 years down the line, still paying the rent for that shop before it eventually went. And somebody eventually came along and actually put a signature on a dotted line, and then we were free again. But that cost us.
A weight that was lifted.
Oh, I mean, it was a huge weight. But I mean, to that point, it almost sort of destroyed the whole thing, really, because it was so much money for so long that was just disappearing from the business.
Eating out your bottom number, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly it. So it was a mad one, really. So I think it was probably during that period and beyond where, I mean, obviously I started the business with my ex-girlfriend Jo, as a proper business partner. Eventually, we then actually, even during that period, I think maybe it was before, actually, yeah, God, there's so much to it. Before we'd shut the Plymouth shop, we'd already actually opened another shop in Falmouth as well. So I was just like, obviously I'm clearly on a mission here. I don't know what my end cause is or what my aim is, but I'm just like, oh yeah, we'll just do that. Yeah, that sounds cool, we'll do that. And we actually took on a shop in Falmouth again, that was a little bit different, because that was a little bit more of an all-round tackle shop, because it was the only one really in the town at the time. And again, somewhere like Falmouth, loads of LRF there, loads of fish, loads of boats, loads of fishing around there. So that was a cool little place. We had Aaron Inslee, the rod builder, in there for us, and Ben Tregoning as well, who will still see a bit now, who were running that one for us. And it was a nice, just little tackle shop. That one actually was cool. That one didn't have so many problems because it was more of an all-round tackle shop. But then there was a point, I think, probably during or just after maybe the process of the Plymouth shop disappearing eventually, that by that point I think myself and Jo were just really strained, because it was a lot of work. Jo admittedly had to put up with me for a lot of years, just being totally on one all of the time.
Work together, live together.
Yeah. So your life just becomes what's happening here, especially when you've got stresses within the business financially.
It goes home with you,
it's literally like every conversation you're having eventually is like about the business, and that's not really where you want to be.
Well, I've got my wife.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Exactly, yeah. I mean, I sort of make occasional jokes with Rose, my wife, now, but actually, realistically, you probably should just not do it, obviously. So, admittedly, I would never have done it without her, and without Jo, the art of fishing would never have ever been a thing. But obviously it had its strains eventually. And then when we parted ways eventually, I forget what even year it actually was, but at that point it was just me effectively at that point. So
do you have to buy her out? Yeah,
a long time down the road I eventually managed to. But at that point we had the Falmouth shop, the Plymouth shop had just gone, I think. And we obviously had the art fishing in Wadebridge by this point, because we'd relocated the original shop to Wadebridge after a couple of years because we needed more space, basically. So by this point, like I say, it was all very strange with Joe and myself. Eventually parted ways. At that point, I then had to sit back and be like, this is a bit crazy, obviously. I can't do all of this by myself. Because Joe was always the very organised one, whereas I was always just ideas and motivation and just trying to inspire customers to do stuff to help them. But actually, I couldn't do it all. So at that point, I had to make the decision pretty much to close the Falmouth shop, because I couldn't possibly be running all of these other parts of the business and running or helping to run and manage the Falmouth shop as well. So it was a shame at that point that we sort of took these steps backwards in some respects. I mean, I always feel really bad about that, because only from a personal perspective, because I'm so self-critical that as soon as I might consider somebody to be thinking that I failed in something that I've done, I mean, it'll bring me to tears, literally. Like, I mean, I remember a conversation with Joe at one point prior to us closing the Plymouth shop, where obviously the numbers weren't adding up, but I was kind of thinking about it earlier to Dave, and I think it might have been one of the Shimano reps at the time. I think who had said something about the fact that I'd obviously explained just quite openly, because I can't hide anything, that maybe we were struggling a little bit in the Plymouth shop because of the expense, and he was pretty much just like, yeah, you should probably close it, and he was giving bits of advice, which probably in hindsight were very helpful. But I remember being at home with Joe probably one of the evenings following, and she was a bit like, yeah, I think maybe we should close it. And I remember being like, I think I literally just, I'm not afraid of admitting it, I think I literally bolted to our bedroom and just burst into tears, because in a way I kind of remember now thinking back that all I wanted was for the Shimano rep not to feel like he was right. So I just was like, I kind of need to do this, like, I can't close the shop. I basically can't close the shop, because people will think that I failed, or this single guy will think that he was right all along, and I don't want him to. I don't want to admit that.
It's amazing, because these people aren't even thinking that half the time.
No, I know they're not. That's it.
You never see them again anyway. No, half of them.
Exactly it.
I've been through those pains.
It's so hard.
What you're talking about.
But like I say, that sort of that fear of people thinking you're failing, I think, has led so many things that I do just from a personal perspective. I mean, I've told you guys, I mean, actually this year I was diagnosed with ADHD, which not many people know about, to be honest, at the moment anyway.
They do now.
But it's one of those things where I think now in hindsight it explains so much about all of the decisions that I've made along the way.
I was listening to you talk, so I've got ADHD. My parents died. I was diagnosed at like 6. They tried to put me on Ritalin, all this sort of stuff. Yep. I'm highly dyslexic. And as you were talking, I was just smiling to myself, because all those things you're talking about, I've been through. Jumping from this to this, super impulsive. We're sat on a podcast I didn't have 6 weeks ago with a Tuna Gear brand that I've never had any intentions of doing. Yeah. And I've done the same thing with storage yards. We went into my 4th storage yard I opened. I went in there I was thinking about you in the Plymouth tackle shop. I went into that yard, everything I touch turns to gold. I can do this, I can do that. Yeah. And we opened it. Nobody turned up. I couldn't get customers in there to start with. We were using every trick in the book. Now it's full and it's worked. But that's what I'm like. I just turn around and I'm like, right, we're going in over there, or okay, we're going to go and do this project over here, or I'm going to go and do this now over here.
It's so hard, because I think, like I say, in hindsight now, I mean, even when I was a kid, there were obviously I've now been tested and diagnosed, and everything's clarity in a way. Well, it came about because really, I suppose, eventually, like my wife Rose now, well, I mean, we've been together 7 or 8 years, and actually eventually, obviously, I can be hard to live with. I can be hard to work with. I mean, I think sometimes staff that we've had will have trouble keeping up with me, because I'm just we'll do this week, and then we're going to do this, and we'll never finish anything.
All the lads in work used to think I was bipolar. Yeah. Because I fly from one thing to the other. Yeah. They just don't get it.
I mean, I
think it's a massive advantage, personally, once you know how to control it.
And that's the kind of the point I'm getting at now, because I spent my whole life up until now, I mean, I can almost split our business into periods of time. Like certain things happened, and then something else happened, and then something else happened. It's only to like I say, to when we sort of first had this realization that maybe this was the case. It probably started when, because I had a little boy. We had a little boy. He's nearly three this month. But obviously, when you have a kid, you're worrying about literally everything. ADHD is one of those things that when you don't know about it, you're almost scared, perhaps as a new parent, that your child is going to have ADHD because they're going to be bouncing off the walls and all the stereotypes that you have no idea about.
I've got a 6-year-old like
until you have it. And actually, I was worried about that. So I started looking into, among other things, ADHD specifically. And I was like, well, just started looking at all these symptoms. And eventually I was like, hang on a minute, that's me. And it's all of them. The only thing that's ever kind of got me through undetected in a way is, well, there's probably two things. The first thing is that I'm not typically all over the place hyperactive. I mean, a lot of people that know me would think that I'm actually quite an introvert in some respects. I can be one or the other, to be honest, but a lot of the time you could think I was quite a quiet, shy person. But it turns out that actually when you sort of look at me with the tests, I mean, there's various hyperactive things that I do. They're just not the kind of causing trouble types that you assume ADHD is all about.
I was the other side of the spectrum.
That's it. Yeah, the more obvious type in a way.
So that's how I've always known you, as being Ben, the quieter Ben.
Yeah, that's it.
Ultra into when we could find a subject that we wanted to talk about. I always knew that your passion that just fired up. So that's how I know you. The detail in your passion for something, but you being the quiet guy in the background.
That's the good thing about it, isn't it? Because, like you say, if you want to learn about something, or if you're really, it's not even something that's difficult to do. I don't think with ADHD, because you just do it. But you basically, like we say, although it's very impulsive, it might be like, right, well, I want to build a lure fishing website and review lures. I'm gonna just go all in. Like I'm not even gonna be doing my job when I'm doing this. Like literally, I will do as little actual work as I can while I'm pissing about with this other little thing that I can't get out of my head that I have to do.
There's nothing else you can do. There's no point
it's so hard.
Applying yourself to your main job.
No, I mean, because all you're thinking about is the other stuff. Like you just can't stop yourself. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, perhaps why I've been dubious even about sort of telling people in some respects that I've met, because one or two of the few people that I've told have been like, oh, no, you haven't. We're all a bit like that. And because like I say, it's easy from the outside to simplify something like ADHD because you know the stereotypes. And also the other thing with ADHD, I think that as which is quite commonly accepted and known, is that as you grow up, you learn how to mask it in a way. So you learn how to be normal, or you learn how to cope with certain situations in your own way. But lots and lots of coping mechanisms. And you realise eventually that literally everything you're doing is almost a coping mechanism, because in your head you are just all over, like just with
it's
ideas.
A place, isn't it?
I mean, it's amazing. Like you say, it can be a positive thing, because I think I end up being very. I've always sort of thought that maybe I'm very good at just generally solving problems, because it's like I've always got solutions, because I can think that this and this and this will lead on to this, and then you can
because you're indirectly solving problems in your own head day to day anyway. It becomes a natural thing that you.
I guess that kind of balls into like something that I wanted to talk about was obviously you're running a shop. We've gone through the trials and tribulations of the successes, the failures in that, and you're still running a shop, and then you're like, I want to run a lure festival.
Well, and
obviously not from just the Devon Bass Bash this year. There's a lot that goes into that, and mine is tiny compared to what you've done over the years, and that's been a monster. Obviously, that's almost a job in itself, is arranging a festival and arranging that. So how did that come about? Did you? Oh fucking hell! I need more punishment. I'm going to arrange a big festival.
Yeah, like I said, my brain has no limit to the punishment. That's the problem. So it's like, well, if this is good for the business, we'll do it. Yeah. Even if my brain cannot handle it.
Is that where it started as something to promote your own business?
Yeah, well, really, because that's it. Because like I say, at the time, especially those early days, because the first lure festival we did, I think, was in 2011. Again, there was nothing like it. There weren't many shops. There was nothing going on. There was no. I think that maybe there was a bass event in Weymouth that I'd been to prior to that, actually, but that was the only thing that I sort of knew of at the time, I think.
Yeah, I think the World Sea Forums had like a bass meet.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I think that was the only one really at the time, and it was genuinely just for the business. I mean, you do what you need to do to promote what you're doing. Obviously, There's this whole, there's,
Yeah.
there's this whole, there's this
We're sitting in one now.
You're sitting in
There's
one,
this whole community out there who are really into all of this stuff, and they're the sort of people that I'm obviously like-minded to, because we all enjoy these styles of fishing. So with the shop and with the business, we were just like, actually, let's just run a little competition, and just like, nobody's really doing it at the time. Actually, there were very few catch and release competitions, if any. There was the Weymouth one, which, like I say, I know was catch and release. But other than that, all the sea fishing competitions at that point were still just pop it on the head and take it to weigh it in.
Yeah.
So from day one, we were just like, actually, no, there is a way of doing it as a catch and release with length. We can do as many things as we can to get around any possibility of cheating, as long as we think about these ideas. Luckily, I have no shortage of ideas for any situation. So we were just like, well, we'll just do this, and this is how we're going to do it. Nobody's done it, but I don't care, because I know we can. And then we just ran our first one, and then it really just sort of grew from there. I think
Every year since?
Yes, we've run literally every year, apart from COVID, perhaps. I think we missed one. I think the LRF event we didn't run 1 year, just because LRF went through a bit of a dip at one point where there just weren't many people involved already doing so much. So we did do 1 year where I don't think we really had the interest to make it worth my time to organise it. So we did pull the plug on one of them, but it's run every year other than that. To the point where now I think last year we had about 160 anglers, something like that. And it's grown to
the last one.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is every single year for about the last 10 years, I've not wanted to do the next year, to be really honest.
Of course, yeah. I can imagine it's a lot.
It is, because like I say, especially again with my brain being the way it is, and actually not realising any of that until recently. Every year with the Lure Festival, in the month up to it, I'm just exploding, literally. Like,
How
I
long
can't
does it take
handle.
to put one together?
Well, I mean, it's. I leave everything to the last minute always. So, like, it takes about a day, the day before.
Still doing it when we're rocking up, signing in.
That's it, yeah. So no, it's a lot of thought more than anything. But it's. I think the other side to perhaps the way that I am generally is that, and there's lots of people like this anyway. Just with perfectionism and things like that, you want to do everything you can as perfect as you can. That costs me so much time overall, because I will, for example, with as an off-piece perspective with websites, I'll just start making a website and almost finish it, and then I'll be like, oh, I don't really like this one. 3 months of work, and I'll just be like, oh, it's just not quite right, and then I'll just find some different, better thing that I want to work on, and I'll go and do that instead. So it's a little bit like that with all sorts of stuff, and the Lure Festival is a bit like that in terms of trying to put the information together and rewriting stuff so many times. So
do you not use AI?
Not at the moment. I think the problem with
get yourself on it.
Well, I will, but I'll have to get something.
GPT-4, $20 a month. Game changer.
I'll have to get something really good, because the problem with
voice notes.
Well, the problem with a lot of our really niche stuff is that AI, from my experience previously, is that it still struggles a little bit with the higher end niche stuff.
ChatGPT-4, because if you're not paying for it, it is very limited on what it will do. But I use it for everything, and I talk to it as well, and it starts learning. It's almost like your own personal assistant. Game changer.
Yeah, right, yeah. That would be me, because that would help a lot, because like I say, it
takes me hours, because my spelling's terrible. Yeah. I'm trying to do emails. I'm the same as you. I want everything perfect. I'm lucky my wife's an English teacher, so she used to have to proofread. Now I've got AI.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just in your pocket.
Yeah. Well, I think the point I'm getting to now, actually, like I say, now that I know not what's wrong with me, but I know my brain better now, and that's the difference, is that, like I say, now that we've sort of started to go down this path, like I said, a couple of years ago, had our child, started looking into it, eventually realised that probably that was me. Then I think there's a podcast, actually, there's loads of podcasts these days, obviously. There was an ADHD one that I just happened to listen into one day, because I was like, actually, I don't know anything about this really, but all of these symptoms are me. And then actually I remember, again, there's a general pattern here will be me crying, is that literally I think I was just driving home in the car one day, having spent the day in the shop in the afternoon just listening to some ADHD podcasts. I ended up listening to about 5 in a row, because I was like, oh my God, this is just me all over. So went home, literally got home as well. Like I say, got home, sat in bed that night, told my wife about the fact that I think I've got ADHD. And I was just like burst out crying again. I feel emotional about it, even just talking about it, but just like burst out crying, because I was like,
relief of knowing that there was
1,000,000%, because I was like, oh my God, up to this point, life has been so hard and so stressful that to know kind of like why is just such a good thing. So it's only really, I think from that point, obviously, then you start to just understand what your limitations are. And you're like, well, okay, I know that I'm going to want to do that, but it's just too hard. I've got to stop myself doing that. so much if I can. I mean, with ADHD, you can't just stop. I mean, you can't just stop, but it's kind of at least understanding that maybe if you had a more normal, for want of a better word, brain, then you probably wouldn't be doing that right now. And it's just the understanding. So eventually, when it came to sort of like eventually this year, literally early this year, January this year, going through the various processes that are involved with being diagnosed, having then eventually to follow on from that medication to help me basically, I'm like clean slate from this year. So all of the potential that I probably always had but never fulfilled because of various problems along the way, now I'm kind of like a lot more doing what I should be doing, a lot more focused. Like it only, to be honest, I mean, last night, again, tangents all over the place for me, but last night, I was telling myself last week, I've got to get a good night's sleep before I come up to see you guys, because having a little one at home, don't get loads of sleep typically. This was like, I just want to have one good night's sleep, and this, like last night coming up here would have been the ideal one. Last night, medication lasts about eight hours, I suppose. Take it in the morning, lasts about 8 hours. By the evening, I'm obviously just back to normal, really, and being a bit mad. 10 o'clock last night, sat down and was like, right, I'm just going to do a little bit of work, just catch up with a couple of bits of emails. Well, I knew I'm working on almost another part of the business that we'll be launching soon, because obviously there's never not time for a new part of the business.
Create more, yeah.
Last night I was like, this has been winding me up for ages that I've not done this website yet. I just need to get something really simple in place. 3 o'clock this morning.
I was going to say 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's my
I rolled into bed thinking, I mean, the thing is, like, from probably about 10 o'clock till 3, when I'm just in the zone, I literally can't stop. Like, I know I shouldn't be doing it. I didn't drink anything.
You know you're going to be paying for it in the morning.
Oh, yeah,
well.
but like, this is just ridiculous. But I can't not leave that freaking thing there like that. I've got to move that over there. And then when I've done that, like, I've got to fix that thing there. And then I might as well just try and finish it now. So then we're just going for it.
So this can segue into what's going to be my next bit for you. Recently, Art Fishing Weybridge.
Yep.
Didn't close to the public.
Yeah.
But you're no longer a walk-in shop as such. You can book in.
Put the website up, please, buddy.
Yeah. Yep. You can book in to come in and do like consultations, but as a whole, Art Fishing down there is no longer a walk-in store. You're more dedicated to the online sales, fin ferry distribution side of it, and the brands that you import.
It's what Rockmax do.
Have you found that being slightly narrowing yourself down now into more of an aimed direction with this? Do you think that's going to... Is that part of the diagnosis?
Well, that's it, absolutely.
Is this going to refine you more because now you know what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's both really, I suppose. I mean, like I say, we sort of, perhaps even prior to being diagnosed, like already I knew by that point, trying to understand my brain and trying to understand how ADHD may have affected me over the years. It is trying to, like I say, kind of in a way, perhaps just having a little boy as well, trying to stop this business from just jumping left, right and centre, never really making any money, to be honest, because I'm always into one thing and then on to the next, like I said. But actually, it's always had potential. And I think
it's got the legs to be.
That's it. I mean, I think I've always been so lucky that we've got so many loyal customers that have actually stuck with me over the years, because part of it's because of them, because to be honest, there's a certain amount of external pressure that's always wanted me to be more online, because we've always had these amazing products that actually, without the website really functioning properly until, again, just recently, I've had all this amazing stuff, but no real way of selling it. So it's really just been in the shop.
But I mean, Ben, give you credit where credit's due. I mean,
I've never seen anything.
You've got these graphs of actions on rods where you explain rods and what the actions are, and you can break it down. I mean, fucking hell, mate. I mean,
well, that's,
no one else is doing
again,
that,
I like to I kind of feel that I always want to do something different. I think that's the thing. I don't want to just run a normal anything, really. So I think and I think as well, why I started doing this with the curves is because from being in the shop environment, or even to a certain extent being online, is that you'll get customers, for example, who all brilliant people, but when it comes to rods, it's the hardest topic, because there's so many things in fishing where we're all like, oh yeah, that's fair. It's your personal opinion. Yeah, that's okay. That's fair enough. That you like that rod. I like this rod. It's all personal. But there's certain things with tackle where there are some facts that seem to get glossed over a little bit when it comes to just putting it all down to personal opinion. For example, rod balance or rod action. I mean, rod balance is the best one probably, because you might have a conversation going on between two guys. One of them is insisting that one rod is better balanced than the other. The other guy will insist the opposite.
That's a brand thing. People buy into brands, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but it's also the sort of thing where clearly only one of those rods is better balanced. So one of them isn't 100% right. And I think when I've sort of chatted to lots of customers in the shop where they might say something that actually I kind of know not to be true really, or something that I at least have little doubts in my mind about. We started on a historic version of the website with this sort of thing, where I was literally measuring, get a little caliper, literally measuring the tapers of all the rods, trying to find out tip diameters and butt diameters and everything in between, and trying to figure out the maths behind the rods almost. So taking it to a point where...
But you're talking like R&D levels from a manufacturer brand's idea, but you're talking about that.
You're backwards designing something.
In a way. I want to find out why it does what it does.
But at the end of the day, you're talking about stuff that normally only brand guys or manufacturers would be thinking about, but you're actually doing this because you're offering that to a customer.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important.
That's madness,
I think the thing is with rods are one of the prime ones, because you look on websites and it's just like generic manufacturer's spiel. There's like...
And you take for granted that what they say are medium fast.
That's it. I mean, there's really no representation.
As a tackle geek that loves the real ins and outs of the gear, it's fuel to... I just love it. I understand it. Yeah. There's a lot that don't. Obviously, working in a general tackle shop, I know there's lots of people that don't understand it. But to me, I love it. I think it's great. But I think offering this, whether you're buying into a Zenark or whatever, fucking hell, I mean, it's a lot. But when you understand it and you figure out the reasons why, it opens up a whole world. And again, it's a service that you're offering that, I think is people don't necessarily thought they needed, but actually when you dip into it...
That's going to be my question. What does a customer get out of this?
Well, I mean, you'll get to know once you've... Again, like you say, there's two steps to it. Initially, and probably right now, and like you say, when you just look at it first off, a customer might, in the simplest terms, I'd hope that they can typically see how perhaps the power between two rods may differ in the most simple terms, or the action may differ.
This will equate into casting, playing a fish under the tip.
See, it actually affects everything. This is where it's now my job to explain this, really, because admittedly there's certain things, and I think that's the thing, it's my job, or in a way it should be any tackle shop owner's job, to be able to explain the facts about the products to the customer.
I don't think enough of them understand
to ensure that actually the customer's getting the right rods. Because again, to take it back to where we kind of were earlier, where from a personal perspective, I want every rod that I sell to be appreciated by that customer. I want them to buy the right rod. I'll feel personally guilty every single time if they've bought a rod that I then see online 3 weeks later that they're selling because it's not right. Like, I'd rather I just give them a refund, because like I don't want them to waste money. And I don't want them to fish with the wrong rod when they could be having something better. Because you see loads online, I think, especially when you get big brands with loads of marketing, loads of money, loads of power, who quite rightly and fairly, they're successful in getting lots of rods into lots of shops. So lots of people see those rods. But if you have the luxury of comparing those rods with some of the others, it's not necessarily they're better or worse sometimes. It's more about the fact that there might just be one rod that's more suitable for what they're personally doing than the rod that they've been told to buy.
So have you got a checklist of things when I walk into your shop and I go, I'm looking for this. If you got a line of questions from budget to what you're doing, where you're fishing,
all those things.
And very quickly you can start walking through that graph.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Do you have people that come in then, you run through that list of questions with them, you go, you should be on the major craft, but they go, I want the Savage Gear.
Yeah.
Do you go...
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's one of those where actually, again, I guess I'm in a lovely situation in that it's nice that people listen to what I say, because there's not probably many times when you could come into the shop and say you want the Savage Gear that I wouldn't ensure that you leave with something better, and I know that you'll enjoy it. We will even go as far as actually just taking them out on the bank of the river out in the town. It's an estuary, basically, so it's wide enough and deep enough for us to have a cast. So we'll literally put rods on reels and actually and go and have a cast.
But it's the beauty of that is as knowing who you are and knowing what you are. If a customer comes to you and they've got a lower end brand in mind, you're not just going, I'm going to sell him a father.
Oh, no way.
Because you know your shit then.
I mean, I sell them out with the idea more often than not.
Yeah. So you know your shit, and we know, most of us know that how involved you are in it. So yes, you the beautiful part is you're able to upsell them, not because you're rubbing your hands as a shopkeeper being like, yes, but because you've got the knowledge and expertise to be able to tell them, actually, this is better suited to you. And they are quite often happy to almost double their budget because you've given them exactly what they came for, that expertise, which isn't available when you go to your
I think that casting thing into the estuary is a game changer.
Yeah, well, it is, isn't it?
The amount of times you just walk into a shop, you pick it up and you go, I like that.
Yeah, you can't tell much. There's some of the higher end rods, especially coming in now, where I would forgive anybody for coming into the shop and just thinking, why is that 500 quid? Like, what a waste. But then when you actually take them fishing and spend some time with them, you realise how much more versatile they are in an actual fishing situation than anything cheaper, let's say. Like, it's not all about price, obviously, like we said. And like I said a minute ago, I mean, more often than not, if you come in and say, I've got 500 quid, what shall I buy? Like you say, I'll still be running through the questions. And then more often than not, if I know that, for example, you've not got loads of experience, then I'll be like, actually, you don't really want to do that because you've got to start cheap, realistically, so that you can then appreciate why a 500 quid rod is a 500 quid rod.
Go learn your trade first and then come back.
I had it definitely with the Norris Lure tree.
Yeah.
And people picked out thinking, that's horrible.
Yeah, right.
But actually, when you used it for what it was used for,
amazing.
They were fucking amazing. And I love mine. I love
mine. I would still have one if I could.
Yeah, I've still got mine. And but you could easily pick that up if you didn't know and be like,
yeah, absolutely, and that can happen so easily with some of these higher end rods. I think what's changed with rods over the years is that there's almost 3 different categories of rods that I would put out there. There's what are the European rods, which are typically slightly more robust, slightly powerful. Bit thicker, just a bit thicker all over, really. Okay. That's it. Yeah. So they're never the lightest. They're never the sort of quickest recovery. They're just good fishing rods. They're just solid. They do the job, and they're just good sort of fishing rods. Then you've got your Japanese rods, which are typically not necessarily even the lightest, but I would say they are the most advanced in terms of what they'll do. In terms of not always, no, because actually more often than not, the Japanese rods can be much softer. I mean, they're actually, to be honest, they're hugely varied. Actually, they can be a bit of everything.
I've said this before when the Japanese industry in the market there's the whole world of her get into that. They just do it properly and Ben can vouch for that. I mean, there's a whole world.
And I think then you've also got like what I call almost like this third category as well, which is almost like a bit of a hybrid where you've got brands in the UK or potentially some in Europe, I don't know, but actually they're creating rods that are Japanese inspired, but done in a very UK trend way, because I think the trend at the moment, for example, is for rods to become lighter and lighter and lighter, or for customers to want them to become lighter and lighter and lighter, and typically faster and faster and faster. And that's meaning that then you've got brands like HTO, for example, who George at Tronics there he's done an amazing job all along of bringing in products that people want to buy, which is brilliant. But it does mean as well that we end up with this sort of, well, it's good. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all, so I won't phrase it like that. But actually we end up with these rods that are very fast and very steely and very light. The only downside sometimes with that style of rod, and it's not an H2 thing at all, so don't get me wrong, but when you get rods that are getting lighter and lighter and lighter all the time, they do tend to become naturally a bit more brittle as well. So especially in the cheaper price ranges, to be honest, because when you've got a low manufacturing budget, let's say, and a retail that you want to kind of hit, obviously you're going to be doing the best you can within that budget. But when you're also trying to go lighter and lighter and lighter, there's a limit to how far you can push it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, basically. The Japanese rods, there's all sorts of clever carbons and resins with companies like Toray and people like that these days, making the rods more robust as well as becoming lighter. So it's getting better now. But there was a period where I think that sort of 50 to 60 to 100 quid price point was a bit of a risky one from a retail perspective, because unless you bought you couldn't buy a Japanese rod for 100 quid.
Is that trade you're talking?
No, this is retail. So you couldn't buy a Japanese rod for 100 quid. You could buy either. Typically, it was going to be a European rod. If it was an Eastern European rod, some of them are getting very, very light. So again, it's a tricky price point because they can be brittle or they can be too solid. So it's just difficult.
How many people do you find that come into the shop are price based nowadays? Is it getting a bit more of a pinch?
Yeah, I suppose so. But to be honest, I think the thing is, since we've kind of changed the way the business is working recently, it is naturally aimed at higher end stuff. So,
but they're coming to you because it's what you offer. They're,
that's it.
They're not artificial. They've searched you. They know about you because that is their genre they're in.
Yeah, well, that's
There's no need. They know that's what you offer.
They know they're not going to. In a way, they're not going to come to us for £100 rod anymore. So
people have. So do you find then that people have already bought their £100 rod? They've gone through their learning process. Now they've as we all do in our fishing, we go through our education.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, now I'm ready to go have a spend. And that's where your niche in the market is now sat.
Yeah, and that's where I'll make sure they get the right rod, basically. I mean, like I said, when we had the shop, it's obviously changed since we've closed the shop, because when we had the shop, being in Weybridge where we are, or were technically, we're right on the high street. So we would get every type of angler come through the door, to be honest. So to be honest, one of the reasons why we closed the shop in Weybridge, because actually last year it actually didn't have the worst year. But having done it now for having run the retail shop for 13 years or whatever it was, again, I just need a bit of a change and a bit of a break. Like I say, I've got to, now that I understand my brain and the way that I am, I need to start focusing more on what is perhaps more long-term, the plan. I need to make money for my family and for myself. And actually running the shop was always going to have its limitations, because any retail outlet is only ever going to have a finite number of customers that are going to walk through the door, because it's literally just who's in the area. Yeah, that's it. There's only so many people in the area, and there's only so many people of them that are going to ever buy a high-end rod. So you're always limited with any retail shop as to who's in the area. Whereas the online side obviously is limitless in its potential. Yeah. So it was eventually, I knew it was always going to be the sensible thing to do, but I've always enjoyed making customers happy, because like I say, it's sort of one of the things that I need to do with the way my brain is.
It's now a one-to-one experience. So where you didn't want to have that tackle shop where you're doing sabikis, floats, some lead weights, that is the quintessential tackle shop, and that's going to be your bread and butter and allow you to sell this stuff. Or you shut it and you give it that one-to-one experience, and you go really niche.
This is just what we do again, because in a way this is where we started. I mean, it's kind of gone back to where we are, and that's what's nice about it from my perspective now, is that obviously, like I say, I suppose I've been on a journey or whatever, but actually now I'm kind of back to where I know my place is, in a way. I mean, the problem with the shop is, aside from it being busy and me needing a break, is that actually it's always detracted from the online side. I mean, there's another big issue we had along the way was to go back to 2018 really, is there was a point with the shop and the website where, again, by this point I was working by myself in the Weybridge shop. We'd closed by this point Plymouth and Falmouth, and we'd moved the original shop to Weybridge, which is a good thing. I mean, that's been a great thing. But it was a case of not being able to physically do or mentally do the website and the shop by myself. But also just employing numerous people to help out wasn't financially viable at that point either, because to this day, I'm still paying back debt from those old days. So there's always things that have been holding it back. And one of them, like I say, was I can only do so much. And it's, like I said earlier, been amazing that we've got so many customers around the country that want to buy the products that we sell. But I never had the time to service them properly while I was also running the shop. I could never work on the website, because by the time I get home at the end of the day, after working in the shop all day and chatting all day, I couldn't do it. I was just fried. So
obviously, Fin Fury, Art Fishing, you just scroll off a couple of these brands that you import and you sell. So I mean, people that may not be overly familiar. What are the brands you're proud of?
The main ones that we do. I mean, there's a few things that have gone full circle. Stories behind all of them, but actually, the main one that we've been bringing back most recently. I'll start with the lures actually, because they're the simplest. There's Eco Gear. I mean, Eco Gear is a brand that, to be honest, we originally introduced to the UK in 2010. I've got a feeling that actually in our first little shop, again, it was not a thing at the time. LRF, for example, where in that little St Mirren shop when we first opened, Eco Gear was one of the brands where they've always had this light game product range. It's a lot of what they do. They're one of the most highly respected brands in that area. We had this little sort of A3 panel in the shop where I plonked these little LRF bits basically from day one. And that was Eco Gear, and when we launched Eco Gear in the UK, eventually after the first sort of 18 months, or it might have been 12 months, we eventually then handed it back to Maruku UK, who by that point, who were the parent company basically in Japan, Maruku. We then basically handed it back quite voluntarily, because it was always going to be part of the deal, handed it back to them when they'd established by this point a UK base. And at that point, they then started spreading it across the country and doing a proper job of it, as it were. But then years down the line, they ended up shutting their business in the UK. So Eco Gear as a brand disappeared entirely. I forget how long ago that was now, probably 2016, something like that, 2017. So we then, a couple of years ago, I just wrote a couple of emails to Japan and was like, hi, everybody, we're still here. Would you be okay if we actually got the ball rolling again? So they said yes, and which is lovely because I know they've said no to lots of other people in the meantime. But just because of the historic relationship that we always had with them, they were open to the idea. So we're now bringing that back. We've it's again one of my billions of things that I've been working on forever, but not actually finishing. Some of our trade customers, I wind them right up probably because I'm always like, yeah, this B2B website I'm working on, we'll get you sorted soon. We'll be sending stock up and whatever else. To this day, oh God, it's still a work in progress. But that actually was what I was working on last night. So it's really close now to finally getting there. But this sort of trade side of what we do, helping other shops. I mean, it's the next step in an evolution, I suppose. Is
a wholesaler.
Yeah, we've kind of come to sort of the point where starting as a retailer, learning the products, learning the customers, learning the market generally, knowing which way the trends are going to go, or even guiding the trends if we can. Knowing, like I say, creating relationships in Japan and around the world, to the point where now those things that we worked on from day dot are all fully accepted methods of fishing. I mean, every big brand now is involved in some way, shape or form with LRF. There's LRF rods in every brand now. Yeah. So it's now a case where, again, I'm in a big transition at the moment where I'm streamlining everything, being more focused with the work that I do or don't do, and now, like I say, working on the next phase, which will be revolved in the future more so around the wholesale side of things, I think, and actually enabling other shops to profit off of the things that I've learned along the way. So Eco Gear is one of those brands that's probably the most universal of the lot because they're basically soft plastic lures of all types that will catch nearly any type of fish. So whether they're freshwater predators or whether they're saltwater ones, they'll catch. There's something in that range for literally everybody, and they're some of the best out there. So they've, and again, from the historic point of view, it's just nice for me, really, because I had such a long-term relationship with them. So there's the Eco Gear lures, there's the Tailwalk rods, which we've done for a little while now. There's all these brands that I mentioned. They're all brands that we've kind of launched perhaps and inadvertently kept to ourselves a little bit because I've always been working on this trade side of things but never finishing it. So there's Eco Gear, there's Tailwalk rods, there's Appia rods, who are getting to the point where now we're sort of getting into the higher end stuff. Very, very clever manufacturers, really just solid, amazing rods to fish with. And then the Zenak, who are very high-end, who are just probably the most exclusive of all rod brands in the world. So it's only really been recently we've started doing those. But it's only really been recently where I think people are more accepting of £700 bass rods, and 1,000-pound tuna rods and things like that. So there's all sorts in there.
Zenak make some stuff.
Their offshore stuff is insane. So
big blue water stuff. That is
popping rods.
Yeah, like really premium stuff.
You've probably got a customer on the way.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. It's mega stuff. So there's those, there's ghosts and lines as well.
Reels as well?
No, that's the thing. I've sort of left reels alone a little bit, almost intentionally, because Daiwa and Shimano in the UK just control everything on the reel front. I think Penn actually have a certain say these days with the saltwater guys.
Yeah, I like a lot of Penn stuff.
Yeah, that's it. It's good. It's just solid stuff. But actually, for us to sort of introduce a reel brand of any kind.
These guys not do reels. They are just rod specialists.
Yeah, none of these do reels typically. So pretty much it's a case of us sort of suggesting to people that even if you come into, we don't sell many reels, unfortunately, these days. That's the problem, because actually there's a general worldwide problem is that there's a massive shortage of reels out there. So actually we've gotten to the point where now it's almost mentally easier for me to not even sell reels than it is to just be constantly waiting on stock that never appears.
Does that not hurt when someone comes in for a package?
Oh, for sure.
If I came to you, I want a rod, a reel, I want braid, and I want 300 quid's worth of lures and a tackle bag and some form of travel net to disappear out the door with.
No, it has a massive effect but there's also nothing I can really do about it, because the idea
it is hard.
The ideal, like I say, the problem is that there's other brands out there that sell reels, but if you're going to come in for a 700 quid lure rod, then you're probably not going to want to walk out with one of the others. So you're going to know what you're on about. You're going to know what your preferences are by that point, because if you're buying a 700 quid lure rod, you're naturally experienced. And you'll know what you want, then actually I can't sell you something that I know to be technically inferior for that job, because again, that's me just wanting you to have the best gear.
Do you find a lot of lads then they've already got a rod along those lines and they're just going and strapping their reel?
Yeah, there'll be an upgrade somewhere or something like that, or I'll even tell them or suggest what reel to buy and from where. Like it's I don't mind sending people to other shops. I mean, I think that's one thing within the trade that probably some of our competitors could misunderstand about me a little bit, because I think within a niche, I think you've got shops and shop owners. Some of them talk to each other. I think some of them probably don't. Because I'm in my little world, I think in my head I get on well with all of them and I could probably talk to any of them. But I know that some of the smallest ones, when they get into the trade, especially early days, they feel like they're just in competition with everybody. And actually, I feel the backlash of that a little bit sometimes.
I've said that before. I mean, competition can be healthy, and essentially competition raises us all. If you have a good, there's no.
But there's always something that they've got which you haven't.
Yeah.
If you've got something which they haven't.
You can't do everything. That's the thing. So actually, I mean, unless you are massive and you've got millions of pounds behind you.
If you're angling direct.
Yeah, that's it. You've got to pick your battles and do what you. And I mean, ideally, I don't pick any battles. That's the point, really. It's a case of actually trying to just do what you can that you feel morally happy with, that's going to help the customer, basically.
So we'll say. So we got this now. I mean, we've established that you guys. You offer our consultation one-to-ones. So how, I mean, we'll just briefly cover, like, say Andy wants to go down, meet with you to go through a modern setup. How does he go about contacting you to be able to come in and be talked about this gear?
Literally just through the website originally. I mean, we did for a while, we had a booking system on there, but actually it was a bit too complex, really, and not really worth bothering with. So now it's literally just like little introduction that you'd find on the website, which is just like, hey, just come in and say hello, we'll do this with you. The benefits of you just coming in and us arranging a time basically that suits both of us, then we'll meet up, you can come into the shop, we'll spend at least an hour if you want to, or longer even if you want to, run you through some of the rods that you might have an idea in your head you already want, or others that I can then throw at you to say, actually, have you seen this? Or, well, like you said earlier, we'll chat about those questions that you might come in with, or the questions that I'll have for you probably more specifically. And then we'll end up probably with 10 rods in front of us, and then we'll whittle them down, basically. It might, if the weather suits, like I said, we might end up strapping some reels on one or two of them and actually taking them over to the river so you can see what they really do. But ultimately, it's all about, I think, again, to go back to sort of me not being a salesman, even if that's what I end up being, it's more about me showing you your options. And then there is going to be something in your head that draws you more to one of those rods than the other. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily, it's never actually as simple as me just saying, here, buy this one, Andy, because that's rarely, when there's so many rods in the shop, there's going to be more than one rod there that I could recommend, because they're all there for a reason. And there might be 3 that I know are going to do exactly what you want to do, and serve you well. And things like spares and availability and backups are important too, which I'll always bear into mind. But actually just showing you your options.
It's the first time I've ever heard a tackle shop owner say that, about the backup side of a rod for spares.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Like, it's the worst thing, again, because I take everything so personally. Like, if you break a rod, then...
I think there's I mean, not that we will, we might. There's a whole episode of a podcast just talking about that behind the scenes of the industry. You know? I mean, unfortunately today we can't go into too much detail of it, but I mean there is a whole talk there.
Yeah, I mean it's the hardest thing, like I say, especially taking things so personally, because if you break a section, there's a side to it where, as the middleman, you feel responsible. I'm sure lots of shop owners will feel responsible when something goes wrong with a product that they've sold. Ultimately, anybody with sort of like any real sense would just be like, okay, well, it's just a rod. I'm not going to take it personally. We'll sort it out with the manufacturer or whatever. But I've had guys genuinely, bass fishing is one of those things where, like I said, a lot of it is quite extreme in a way. Some of the guys will trudge miles up the coast path, climb down a sheer cliff, risk their life even, get to the bottom, and first cast their rod breaks. I've had half a dozen calls over the years, probably, of guys who were just like, effing this effing rod. Like, just because they need to vent at somebody at that moment.
My best mate, Chris Lowe, you know Chris. Yeah. Chris travelled all the way to North Wales on a bass fishing trip. It saved up all this. It cost him stack loads. Ass end of nowhere, got there, and we'd brand new at the time. Obviously, we were part of Shimano. We brand new got the FK Stellas. No one had them in the country. We got there, and he got there on the rocks, had like one cast, pulled the drag, and it failed instantly. And there was an issue with the reel. He travelled all that way. He only brought the Stella and a couple of spare spools, and the reel was fucked.
And you're naturally wound up, aren't you?
He was done. He's like, it's cost me a weekend away, fuel to get there, and the entire weekend was done. There's no tackle shops up there to go and get even a cheap replacement.
Might have been like for you, mate.
Exactly. Yeah.
But he said it was done. That was it.
Yeah.
The session was done. His head was gone.
And I think that's the thing with fishing as well, actually. Like you say, it's easy to lose the plot a little bit. I mean, like I say, coming from a match fishing background, I've seen it happen loads, and it's even happened to me where you stop enjoying your fishing, and if just something does you in a bit like that, it's not even just that session. It's more to it than that, and it can almost make you not want to do certain things again because of the risk sort of thing. But I mean, with regards to the spares, like I said, there's lots of rods out there because of general lack of availability, a lot of tackle over the last few years especially, where if you can't get a spare section, then me as the middleman, there's not a lot I can do apart from just refund you or give you an alternative rod. And that's, both of those options suck, ideally.
Yeah, they cost you money.
Well, that's exactly it. And it's not really the fair way of doing it.
And I guess that's something we can touch on here. I mean, this is an industry-based podcast to the punters. A lot of guys, they don't have the sympathy. It's not that they don't have the sympathy. A lot of guys don't understand the technicalities behind. You can't just ring up some of these companies and say, I need a tip section, because that's not how it works.
No, not at all.
And I think it's really healthy.
I don't understand that. I just thought you'd be able to grab, you go back to your manufacturer. Yeah. We've had this problem. Yeah, that's not a problem. Give us a week. Yeah. It's coming from, the other side of the world. In it comes, in a cardboard tube, bubble wrapped. Here you go, mate, straight out the door again.
Lovely, wouldn't it? Yeah. Rarely is there enough stock to go around, so it's like...
I understand how that's not...
There's so often you just can't get spares for some of these things. Whether it's a rod or other stuff, you just can't get the spares sometimes. So just dealing with companies that I know we can get spares from and actually having some control over. I think that's why I ended up importing so much stuff. And inadvertently, but I suppose basically bypassing some of the companies based in the UK, because from a personal perspective, I need to have control over what I'm doing, because I can't have something happen and then not know how to solve the problem. I need to know what's going to happen if X happens, or if X happens prior to that. So by having control of certain brands means that it can become my responsibility to sort the spares out. And if that's the case, I'm happy to take the flak, because there's no middleman. But if there's a middleman and he can't help me out, then that sucks. So I'd rather be the middleman and ensure that I can actually be the one to help them, really. Yeah. So, but like I said, that's spares is one of those things. There's so much to it, obviously. But
so kind of tailing things out to kind of not wrap things up, but like where we're going from here. So what's next for art fishing? And obviously, to tell this interview out and talk about it, because we could waffle on for a whole day.
I would. So.
That's all right. We'll have podcast number 2. That's not a problem.
Easy, innit? I'll come back.
I mean, and you're always welcome, Ben. Let's kind of not finish up, but kind of like we get there. Benfield, art fishing, Flynn Fury, 2024, 25. What's next, and what can we expect?
Well, simplifying my life means I think we're probably only going to be running 4 websites rather than...
only 4?
Yeah. No, honestly, I think in a weird kind of way it's simpler than it used to be, because we've basically got the 4 projects that we're basically working on now. If we look firstly at what will become more so the wholesale side, let's say, is actually going to be rebranded and renamed from Fin Theory. The name that I'm working with at the moment is actually simply Lure UK. And actually that is going to become a more professional, because a lot of what I've done to this point is, I wouldn't say not professional, but actually I've been working just on the max, to the limit, doing what I can. Whereas actually from this point, more organised, more professional in every respect of what I'm doing with it. So the Lure UK company, the domain name literally just lureuk.co, is the base for the wholesale side. So that'll be more of a trade section. In terms of even the website will be more B2B and a bit of product information for other retailers, basically, to enable them. So Fin Theory will effectively become Lure UK. Okay. I kind of needed a way from this year onwards, a way of actually separating in a way the old from the new, so that I can work in this now different, more organised direction.
A rebrand is great.
So it's one of those things where, like I say, Fin Theory, which was for anybody who doesn't know, was our sort of amateur wholesale company, for want of a better word.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but probably there's a lot of people that don't have a clue.
No, that's it, exactly.
Sorry,
So no, that's cool. So yeah, Lure UK will be the sort of the more official branch now of what we're doing moving forward.
Good name.
Art fishing is, well, it's basic, isn't it? So it's just, it is what it is. It is what it is. So yeah.
Why overcomplicate?
Yeah, that's it. So there's that side of it, which effectively almost becomes the base, because then the art of fishing and the art of fishing website will long term become more about, I guess, because you see it a lot these days, brands or wholesalers having effectively what is, rightly or wrongly, it's become the norm, where wholesalers or manufacturers will have their own retail outlet for their company. So most of the big brands now, you could actually buy, aside from the likes of Dial or Shimano, you could buy from their own website. I've never liked it necessarily, but it's the easiest way for me in my mind to continue doing what we do with the art of fishing, because the art of fishing effectively will become a retailer that's based more around our core brands that we distribute, obviously, as an outlet of where you can buy those brands. Because not every retailer, even if we sell to 100 retailers in the UK, not every product within our catalogue is going to be available through some of those retailers, because naturally they're going to stock the basic ones, the popular items.
The knowledge that you have either,
no,
this insight into.
I mean, hopefully I'll be able to share a lot of that knowledge with them. I mean, that's the point. I want them to be able to sell the products. I mean, the worst thing from a wholesale perspective is to be selling products to a shop and just basically leaving them be, and actually not having any of their staff necessarily know how to sell those products. So I think that's almost part of, if there was a newer way that I wish more wholesalers would work or more manufacturers would work, is actually having people who know what the products are for. In the UK, it's easy with match fishing or carp fishing because most of the sales reps are match or course angler, or match or course or carp anglers. But within lure fishing, so few of the reps you'll ever see actually lure fish. So when they come into the shop, you're just like, well, thanks, that's great. I'll see you in 6 months, and I'll sell the products for you, sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas I think the point of a lot of them really should be more focused on trying to help the shops sell more of their product. So that would be the point of that. So more to do with helping the shops sell our products, because I don't want them to buy these products and then be stuck with it, basically. Because that, again, I'll feel guilty. So that's the wholesale side. The retail side of what is the art of fishing will become more the hub for those brands. Then actually, plus one or two extras, to be honest. I mean, Danny mentioned Megabass earlier. There'll be a couple of brands we'll keep on board just because they're cool and I like them, or perhaps I like the people that work at the company. So that'll be the art of fishing, simplified but still in retail and online only. And then there is the LRF website, which is the LRF branch of our business has come and gone a little bit. LRF has sort of expanded and detracted. It has gone and come again. It's definitely come back again, basically, recently. So
I've seen a surge on it on YouTube. Yeah, there's a lot of lads back into it.
Yeah, so Josh,
maybe for the first time.
So Josh, that works with me at the moment, he's going to take over the running of what will effectively be a new LRF website for us that is obviously dedicated to LRF, splitting that from the art of fishing. So that will be more rounded. That's just all things LRF, basically. Because LRF is one of those things that is still very experimental. Lots of different products, lots of different brands, just really cool stuff. So that will be Josh's job almost, is running this new, to a certain extent, separated LRF business. Which is, again, it's a huge niche, but I think it's something that we've always done. People always look to us for it because we were right there from the start. So that'll be the little LRF
when that
branch.
launches, we'll get you both back on here and we'll have a yap about it.
Well, that's it. Get Josh on as well. Exactly it. And then the fourth thing out of all of those is the Lure Festival side. So the Lure Festival, I think, since we've gone online effectively, I guess the point moving forward is that the art of fishing can become more of a national company rather than being specifically a local Cornish one, because we don't obviously have a Cornish shop anymore. But the thing with the Lure Festival is that it's always been the Cornish Lure Festival. It's always cost me loads of money and loads of time because of the fact that I've never made anything of the promotion that it theoretically should give us. I mean, realistically, it's just an expense and a lot of work, and I get nothing for it almost, apart from perhaps a nice reputation and some pats on the back, which is brilliant, but doesn't help me pay off any previous debt.
It,
yeah, exactly it. Whereas we'll end up from this year effectively renaming it as probably what will be something like the AOF Lure Festival or something like that, so that we can use it more. Selfishly, it may sound, but actually, we need to use it more. So we need to use it more.
It's a great idea.
We need to use it more as a promotional event. But the also benefit to that is that we don't have to run. We'll see what the future brings, but we don't have to run all of them in Cornwall. So we'll see where the future takes us. This year, we're obviously in Cornwall because we've already got the ball rolling.
Listen to what the people say. If you've got lads who are travelling down from
that's it.
the north, the south, like wherever they're coming from, and oh, why can't you do that up here?
That's
all
it.
of a sudden you get that feedback that this has got legs to go.
I mean, we can do almost anything with it, really. That's the thing.
Stagger them through the year as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you'll probably find you have the Cornish boys who want to go up here and fish some of that terrain, because they do it on Wicked Tuna. They have like north versus the south.
Just cool little ideas, really.
It's like you originally said in some of that LRF fishing, where you just want to go up against your mates and it's a competition. And now all of a sudden you can go and get up against boys who aren't on your doorstep, maybe fish a little bit different to you, and up we go. It's a weekend out for everybody.
Exactly, and that's all you want
together at the same time.
That's the point of the Lure Festival, really. It really, more than anything, was always just a social, really. I mean, it was just a social with some prizes, basically.
Yeah.
What sounds better than that?
Well, that's it, exactly, and that's what you hope. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a nice problem to have, but as events get bigger, obviously, they get naturally a little bit more serious. So it's kind of trying to juggle the seriousness of competition with the social element of the weekend.
Real.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So we're at the point now where, unfortunately, the size of it is such that it needs proper management. It needs venues. It almost adds all these costs because you're doing it on such a big scale. So we'll see what the future brings. I've obviously got ideas, because I've always got ideas, but we'll just see what the future brings, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's definitely grounds we get Ben back.
Yeah.
I know,
like I say, I could talk all day, and I know there's loads of things I've not even mentioned. So, but I wouldn't start now. So right at the end. So.
I mean, thanks for being honest. Thanks for opening up a bit. I know you were a little bit nervous about talking about this today.
Yeah.
You didn't see me. You flew straight into that. There was no.
I'm a professional talker.
Yeah, professional talker all day long.
I've known you for a long, long time. It's been nice to sit down and deep dive into a little bit about who you are and the brand. I hope the listeners and the viewers feel the same.
I super enjoyed it.
So
I just got to sit here and listen to somebody that's grabbed something from the very early days from carp fishing. I remember everyone talks about the heyday of carp fishing, and I missed that. I didn't get to be in that. I'm just not old enough, and I wasn't in it at that sort of time. Whereas you got to walk that side of the sea fishing, and it's made me look at where I said like the sea fishing, high-vis jacket, Shakespeare box out. There was guys who were out there getting out and actually doing something.
We've said it with other guests. It's another fishing trip we could go down. But I mean, fucking hell, let's arrange one evening and we'll go down and we'll go for a session somewhere. We'll
definitely do that.
Let's meet up and we can literally do this.
Like you say, it's almost, as I said, LRF especially, one of those things, doesn't matter who you're with even, just go and do it with somebody, and all of a sudden it's a good thing. Yeah.
Go down to the shop and I can show you the shop. You know, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Come and have a look at some stuff. Yeah.
I'll bring the videographer down. We can actually. We're doing some stuff. We had Matt Forrester on, didn't we?
Of course. Yeah.
And we're going to go out on the boat, do some filming with him.
Yeah.
And it's like a follow-up podcast, but in a different way of having a follow-up podcast.
Yeah.
You know, you turn it into that marketing, into that. You know, we come see you. Here's the episode where you came to us. Now we're going to come to you. Now we can look at the rods
behind the scenes.
Yeah, the behind the scenes side.
You have to come to the festival actually. Plan it for the last weekend of September. Yeah, come and actually do it on the festival weekend.
Oh well, I can't say no, can I? Game on. That's fine.
Yeah. Let's leave it at that then. Ben, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me. Amazing.
Great, and we'll.
I super enjoyed it.
Yeah, good.
Another great one.
Well,
this just gets better and better, to be honest.
Right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Remember to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Cheers, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
No worries.